Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Let me first introduce myself and introduce my fellow panel members today. My name is Stuart Itkin. I am responsible for the CMMC and FedRAMP assurance practice at Coalfire Federal. Previously was VP of Product Management at ExoStar, a global organization originally formed to support the defense industrial base, supported by Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, Raytheon, and others. Coalfire is a 20-year-old pure play cybersecurity company that provides cloud security and cybersecurity services to government and to commercial organizations. We're a leading or the leading FedRAMP 3PAO, a CMMC 3PAO and RPO, and we offer a full spectrum of services around risk management, cybersecurity, and compliance. So joining me today is Regan Edens. We can have the next slide, please, Worley. Regan is the founder and the chief technology officer at DTC Global. He was one of the founding and original members of the CMMC accreditation body board of directors. He was also chairman of the standards committee while with the CMMC accreditation body, and he's founding member of a new organization, the CMMC Standards Council. His company, DTC Global, has over 15 years experience in supporting government and organizations across the DIB. And then finally, Sanjeev Verma is the co-founder and the chairman of PreVeil since 2015. Previously, he was the co-founder of Arvana, an innovative mobile communications platform organization. PreVeil, which you'll hear more about, really provides a simple and inexpensive secure document collaboration and email platform for sharing CUI information and ITAR data. And it's designed for the enterprise. PreVeil is used by leading defense contractors for CMMC compliance, supply chain collaboration, and for incident response. So with that, we can move on and let me just start by doing a little bit of stage setting today. As I said, if we can go to the next slide, Orly. Thanks. So today's discussion is about avoiding CMMC compliance pitfalls by relying on proven solutions. And again, some foundation for this. First, it's not about compliance. This is about ensuring that the tools, the weapon systems, and technology our warfighters depend on, and really that their lives depend on, have not been compromised through the theft of sensitive information by our adversaries. So it's about ensuring that defense communications are secure, that our adversaries have no foreknowledge of our tactics and plans. It's about ensuring that our adversaries don't have information to defeat our tactical weapons or our defensive measures. Compliance frameworks describe how we make our IT less vulnerable, but compliance is not the objective. Protecting sensitive information from theft by our adversaries to ensure our warfighters are safe and able to complete their missions is really what this is all about, and we can't lose sight of that. The second, a lot has changed since November with the announcement of CMMC 2.0, but at the same time, a lot has stayed the same. We've seen CMMC go from 5 levels of certification to 3. We've seen the elimination of the Delta controls, including the 997, the 998, and the 999 maturity requirements. We've seen bifurcation for level 2 assessments and then not bifurcation for level 2 assessments. And we'll probably continue to see changes as the final rules making is completed. What's important, but what has not changed, is that DFARS 252.204-7012 is still the law of the land, and under 7012, organizations handling CUI must satisfy NIST 800-171. And by the way, 7019 and 7020 that require reporting a self-assessment score with the potential of a government audit, they're still there as well. So under the DFARS, if you handle CUI, you should satisfy 800-171. This has not changed. So third, And this is really kind of the foundation what this conversation is about. You know, satisfying NIST 800-171 has been hard. It's been a challenge, and especially for small and medium businesses within the defense industrial base. You know, 800-171, it wasn't written for DIB suppliers, you know, who know how to make machine parts or assemblies, or, you know, how to create software, perform services. You know, 800-171, it's specific. It's hard to understand. It's sometimes ambiguous. It takes time, it takes money, and neither the time nor the cost of satisfying its requirements are insignificant. And it requires subject matter expertise with deep knowledge of compliance, of IT and information security. And these people are expensive, and there just aren't enough of them to be able to go around. And so satisfying NIST 871, it was hard in 2017 when we were first required to satisfy NIST 800-171. It's still hard in 2022. And asking DIB organizations to take this on individually, to be able to solve this problem individually, doesn't solve the issues of cost, time, and the need for specialized resources. And more important, you know, taking this approach, asking each individual DIB organization to take this on individually, it just hasn't worked. That's why we're here today. And if DIB organizations continue to try to satisfy these requirements following the same path, it's going to continue not to work. You know, it was Einstein who said, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. And so therefore, you know, what we really need is an approach, or to approach this problem differently. And rather than looking at this as, you know, 350,000 individual DIY projects by organizations within the DIB, you know, each one kind of making the DIY first trip to Home Depot to get everything you think you need, and then the second trip to get everything that you didn't realize that you need, and then the third trip to ask the person there for instructions on how to use the stuff that you bought. You know, what we're suggesting here is a different approach. Suggesting is creating an environment from pre-vetted solutions in a manner that can reduce the cost, the time, and the risk to avoid the need for specialized resources. So Orly, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, good. So let's start by looking at the essentials, the requirements the DoD has established for an organization to achieve the minimum level of cybersecurity required to be entrusted with the safety of sensitive defense information, as described in the DFARS, as described in 800-171 and in CMMC. And there's 4 basics that environments must achieve and must be demonstrable through objective evidence. And these are, you know, first, you need to satisfy NIST 800-171's 110 controls and the 320 individual objectives that are embedded within those 110 controls. Second, if you're using a cloud service or cloud services within your environment, they must be FedRAMP moderate baseline equivalent. It doesn't mean that they need to have a FedRAMP ATO, but it means that they need to have objectively demonstrate that they satisfy all of the requirements of FedRAMP at the moderate baseline. Third, they must use for both data in transit and for data at rest FIPS 140-2 validated encryption. This is probably, you know, one of the most missed requirements, at least the last time that the DIBCAC published a report of organizations that failed to satisfy controls. This was number 1 right there with multi-factor authentication. And the fourth one is that you must satisfy the DFARS 7012 sections C through G, which ensures that data is provided to the DoD in the event of a cyber incident. And so any solution, whether it's pre-assembled, whether it's a solution that you're building yourself, needs to be able to demonstrate through objective evidence that it has met these basic requirements to ensure that it is capable of satisfying or protecting the sensitive information that the DoD is providing. So as I said, satisfying these requirements, it's hard, it's costly. And what I'd like to now do is to turn this over to Regan Edens, who's going to kind of explain a little bit more about, why it's hard, and, more important, what we can do to make it not so hard and not so costly. And after Regan, Sanjeev Verma is going to show us specifically how we can put these principles into practice to be able to create solutions that don't require the cost, the time, or the risk of trying to do this yourself. So Regan, let me hand this over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Stuart. And we are gonna flip over here, and we are gonna get busy. So anyone who knows me for more than about 15 seconds realizes that the devil's in the details. And so what I'm going to show you here, is I'm going to talk about the challenges as they are, not as what we would like them to be, not as if, your top 10 or top 25 results on Google will provide you the answers to, but the challenges as they are before you. That will allow you to make good decisions, and make good decisions with a clear, crystal clear understanding of what your organic knowledge, skills, and abilities and resources are, and then why it would be very important for you to consider other resources in order to augment or support or turnkey your solution sets. So the CMMC ecosystem is struggling, and there's really good reason for that. There's a consistent lack of expertise across the entire ecosystem, both inside of the organization and, of course, outside the organization with consultants and organizations that would provide both products and services to organizations seeking certification, or those ongoing services that are provided in support of DFAR 7012 right now. That lack of expertise and resources is really challenging. It's really challenging because organizations don't know what to do, and a lack of uncertainty on how to apply technologies, inconsistency in services, and what people say when you're trying to explore what your options are. And of course, that creates uncertainty for investments. Now, when we look at why organizations are hesitating, they know that they have to meet DFAR 7012 right now. They know that the tyranny of the urgent is pressing on them. There's no doubt about that. But certainty to certify is needed because making large investments for small and mid-sized companies, and obviously large companies as well, is absolutely critical to their success. And they're thinking in terms of 5 to 7 years, and they want to get it right the first time. And so without a clear understanding of what the requirements are, or why it's required, or even fundamentally how we meet those requirements, that gives us pause and has created a sense of hesitation and doubt and fear even across the CMMC ecosystem. So what we look for when we talk about pre-vetted solutions, and when we talk about reaching out to assets and both technology assets and service providers and vendors outside the organization, what we're really looking for is how do we know that they're providing reliable expertise, that the experience is relevant to both our business and our reference architecture that we're using, the legacy systems that we have in place, and the path that we need to go for future investments, often leading with cloud and so on and so forth. The most important challenge is that they lack an enormous credibility in reliable resources. So when I go to Google, Google's not my friend. The answers come back imperfect, to say the least, unclear, partially correct, and of course, most often cases not correct at all. So if I don't understand how to reach out to credible resources, then how can I make good decisions about my technologies, my services, and the vendors that I need to choose in order to make investments to move forward? So when we look at that, and I encourage you, by the way, to make a screenshot of the slide, because as always, I teach you how to fish. I don't hand you fish. So the reality is that there's a lot more detail that we're including in the slides purposely, so that you can digest this over the period of time after the webinar. So in order to climb this mountain, I have to go through this process of CUI risk awareness. I have to understand and discover where I'm at with in terms of what CUI I have that's marked and unmarked, and what's the training that's required to even understand the requirements and to move forward in order to conduct the appropriate assessments, develop the plan and roadmap to move forward, and then actually implement those requirements, and of course sustain those requirements as we move forward. But if I don't have a crystal clear understanding of the security requirements and controls, I'm in big trouble. And in that, I have to go through a discovery process inside of my environment to understand what types of CUI that we have that's marked and unmarked, what types of CUI that we receive, what types of CUI that we develop. In most often cases, we develop far more CUI than we actually receive. And then where are we sharing that CUI in order to execute the products and services on behalf of the DoD contract? So understanding with clarity the gaps and nonconformities, and then understanding implementation, and then really gaining a grasp of how to monitor and enforce these requirements requires a mastery of the requirements. It requires a mastery of the evidence that's expected to demonstrate that you've met those requirements, and requires a mastery of both the security and the compliance aspects of the path up the mountain. The reality is that most organizations simply do not have those knowledge, skills, and abilities, nor those organic resources. And so the question is in having a crystal clear assessment of my own organization, how do we move forward? How do we develop a cross discipline team, either of organic resources inside my organization, or augment those resources, or outsource those resources to other reliable and trustworthy organizations? So making good decisions really requires a foundation that oftentimes our organizations don't have, and we simply don't know where to turn to gather the information necessary to make good decisions about how to move forward. But when we do move forward, we have to understand with clarity what we have to do, because assessment, and this is straight out of NIST 800-171, assessment requires evidence. And so documentation is the key to your success. Documentation and the evidence that's provided that demonstrates that the security controls and meet the requirements because they are implemented correctly, that are operating as intended, and they are producing the desired outcome. Now, the detail that I have, if you start with the climbing the mountain at the CUI risk and training and discovery, and climb up through the risk and security assessments, through the plan of action and milestones, developing that document, and then having a data-driven decision about how to continue to move forward to address these requirements, have the appropriate reference architecture, make good decisions about my technologies and the services that I need in order to meet these requirements, and then the managed services that I may need that in order to meet these requirements that I may not be able to actually cover within the resources that I have. And then obviously satisfy the supplier performance risk score and do so with accuracy, right? And then culminate all of that information inside the development of the system security plan. That process is the evidentiary development process that we use in order to satisfy the requirements. And having a clarity with understanding what the demands are and the challenges within your organization to satisfy the complexities of these requirements will help you make good decisions about whether I need to fully augment my resources, whether I need to partially augment, or whether or not I'm gonna try and climb this mountain alone through a DIY, and that is not recommended. 5 years from now, perhaps, but not right now. So when we walk into phase one, we're assessing and we're documenting and we're deciding what are we going to do and how are we going to meet requirements. And then how are we going to develop the evidence and the documentation in order to demonstrate the fact that we have met these requirements? And it is a complex process. And in the simplification of it is that I need strong and reliable resources to guide me, to provide the credible guidance and the direction that I need to make good decisions about my technology investments, and then how to document this properly as I drive forward throughout the rest of the process. So in phase two, in implementation, Implementation can be as difficult as it gets when I if I decide, look, I'm going to DIY this. I think I've got it. Got a really great IT team, and I think that we're going to travel this path alone. Very quickly, what you find yourself in is sort of navigating the mountain, and then trying to augment what you don't know in order how to understand and meet these requirements. And through open sources and through webinars and so on and so forth. Again, the same challenges that I mentioned in the very beginning are consistent and prevalent throughout this entire DIY process, which is, who can I trust to give me good advice and good guidance, and who can help me decide what technologies that I need to make investments in, and then what vendors are reliable and trustworthy to follow through. And if I am using an implementer, how can I be certain that they're implementing them correctly? All of this entire package that's required is challenging, to say the least. So sustainment and certification is the goal. Sustainment of the security of the data is the ultimate goal. Certification just represents the fact that I'm meeting the national security interest, and I'm protecting the data. And that is paramount. We are not protecting the mattress and mattress tags, where we are protecting truly the national security interest. And when we do this and getting those security controls right and implementing them correctly and having the appropriate evidence to satisfy the assessor at the time of an internal audit or a third-party audit led by a prime contractor, or the DIPCAC, DCMA, DOD, DCMA contract audit teams, or a CMMC third-party assessor. At the end of the day, I need to demonstrate that we can meet these requirements, we can satisfy these requirements, and sustain these requirements with the objective evidence that Stuart mentioned. So lastly, if you look in the totality of walking through phase 3, what you really see is it is a climb. It is in order to prepare for the CMMC assessment, meeting D4 7012 requirements right now, and ultimately certification. I begin with the end in mind. That's at the bottom of the mountain, and the answer is at the top of the mountain. How do I satisfy the CUI security and compliance requirements and sustain them? And how do the stakeholders inside my organization, or those stakeholders that I trust to provide me trusted solutions or services in order to help meet these requirements, how can I verify and validate the fact that they've met these requirements in order to provide the evidence to meet the CMMC third-party assessment, and of course, ultimately demonstrate that I can satisfy the requirement? That's a long and difficult process. Certainly you can do it. We do it every single day here at DTC Global, and we help clients do this every single day. So but in order to make the decisions about where to begin and who to trust and who to engage, you need clarity with in understand the requirements, understand the complexity, and understand the path to compliance, and certainly the most important, security. All right, with that, I'll turn that back over to you, Sanjeev.
Hey, Regan, can I just ask a question first?
Sure.
Because you talked a lot about trust, trusting the equipment or the components you select, trusting the partners that you work with, and there's certainly a lot of claims that organizations make with respect to their ability to be able to help you satisfy these very challenging requirements. But what is how do you know who to trust, I guess, is really the key question, when people can, through freedom of speech, really say whatever they choose to say.
Of course, and that's the great thing about our country, right? I think that that's a challenging. That is the most challenging part of the process. So certainly, I can start with a CMMC accreditation body, and certainly they have means of certifying and accrediting and registering individuals who have a vested interest in the CMMC ecosystem and have some training and the appropriate knowledge, skills, and abilities to either be certified, to be accredited, or to be registered. So that's number one. Number two, though, is within that pool, though, you have a lot of folks with inconsistency in their experience. And the question is who's got the time and grade in meeting these requirements, who has the most vested interest in helping me meet these requirements. And of course, as you move the process, you can look over time. Now we're about 2 years into a 5-year implementation timeline, right? So hopefully you've been able to see consistency of behavior and consistency of contribution into the CMMC ecosystem to be able to say, look, it's not marketing, it's participation. It's not marketing, it's investment. It's not marketing, it's a determination to see that organizations meet and satisfy these requirements. That can be demonstrated over time. And so I implore you that it isn't just a simple window. It isn't just a simple Google search. It really is about observation with clarity about who's participating actively, who is really driving and leading in the CMMC ecosystem. And then, of course, engaging those pre-qualified, certified, accredited, and registered organizations and individuals through that you can index in the CMMC marketplace and the CMMC accreditation body website.
And I guess that's why, again, it comes back to the notion of being able to have objective evidence around some of these requirements becoming incredibly important through all of this. It's not that what you think is being able to, in fact, definitively demonstrate that. So I know that when you look at all of these things and satisfying some of these requirements, like encrypting data at rest and in motion to satisfy FIPS 140-2 and so forth. I mean, it reminds me Christmas morning. You open a box for your kid, and the words that are, kind of bring terror are batteries not included, some assembly required. And I think that that being able to take it beyond the batteries not included, some assembly required is really kind of the next step. And I think this is what Sanjeev is going to explain to us and give us an example of how do you move beyond to truly have solutions that incorporate and have satisfied these very complex and sometimes daunting requirements. With that, let me turn that over to my friend Sanjeev.
Thank you very much, Stuart and Regan. And I want to first thank you both for very clearly articulating a few very important points, which I want to sort of re-emphasize. The first being how you started the webinar, Stuart, which is that fundamentally DFARS and CMMC are about protection of the controlled and classified information. Compliance is just the process of achieving it. And that's been the foundation principle for our company. And is the fundamental objective that any DIB organization ought to be striving for. I also want to sort of re-emphasize that clearly the discussion so far has shown one thing in ample clarity, which is that this is a complex topic. And in the defense industrial base, there's 80,000 plus companies that will be requiring compliance audits and certification. And given the complexity of it, the first thing on their minds is, how do I even ask the right questions to pick platforms and players that can help me achieve compliance? And as Stuart, you and Regan correctly pointed out, you got to seek objective evidence from whatever platform and whatever assistance you're getting to demonstrate that they can meet the requirements. I think, Stuart, you did a huge favor to the industry by simplifying the questions that need to be asked to 4 questions. The first is, number one, can the platform or the entity that is helping me help me achieve 110 out of 110 in the NIST 800-171 controls? Have they ever done this thing before? Question number 1. Question 2, if you are using cloud services to protect, store, and share CUI, the 3 essential questions to ask is your cloud service FedRAMP baseline moderate equivalent? Do you use FIPS 140-2 validated, and I underscore validated encryption? And can you show demonstrated evidence that you meet DFAR 7012 C through G? So now The evidence that you seek from whosoever is assisting you must be objective. And by objective, we mean the ideal path is they ought to be able to show that through third-party evidence that they meet it. Not that I say I meet it, but I have been audited, certified, or a third party that is knowledgeable can attest to my meeting this evidence. So now let's go and take a look at how PreVeil, which is a platform for storing and sharing CUI. It's an essential platform because you can't use commercial Office 365 or G Suite. How do we present objective evidence that PreVeil's email and file sharing meets these requirements? So requirement number one is meeting the 110 NIST 800-171 controls. And the evidence that we provide is that a PreVeil SMB customer that used Office 365 Commercial and PreVeil was pulled up for a DIBCAC audit. For those that aren't familiar with DIBCAC, it's the Department of Defense's highest audit and certification authority. It's the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center. And they picked up the SMB that was using our systems for compliance, presumably because they wanted to ensure that they were in compliance with existing DFARS, not even for CMMC. But CMMC is also requiring you to meet 110. So what's the objective evidence? When the DIBCAC audit was done, the SMB achieved a perfect 110 out of 110 score. So this is the ultimate demonstration from the highest audit authority that the solution that you're picking has demonstrated ability for you to achieve compliance. And by the way, once they demonstrated NIST 800-171, 110 controls, that's exactly what you need to demonstrate for CMMC level 2. Second, the cloud service must be FedRAMP baseline moderate equivalent. Again, we set the bar high by saying, I'm not going to say I am FedRAMP moderate equivalent, but I'm going to have a FedRAMP 3PO, a leading FedRAMP 3PO audit me and then provide an assessment that I am compliant. And that's exactly the position that PreVeil takes. So if you were to work with us, we will provide you with documented attestation from an independent third-party audit organization that we achieve FedRAMP. And we validated this position and attestation by directly going to the CIO of the Department of Defense. So that's an example of a high bar on meeting these requirements objectively. Third, do you use FIPS 140-2 validated encryption? And here, there should be no other requirement other than to ensure that whosoever you're picking has a NIST certificate that they meet FIPS 140-2. It cannot be that I think I do so. And so certainly in the case of PreVeil, we went through the process and got ourselves certified by NIST. And then finally, meeting DFAR 7012C through G to ensure data is provided to the DoD in the event of a cyber incident. So in the case of PreVeil, we store all CUI for defense customers on AWS GovCloud in a separate environment. And therefore, when and if you're ever asked for the information for forensics, with AWS GovCloud and PreVeil, we will provide you the evidence and the data in compliance with DFAR 7012C through G. So you now have evidence that is third-party, objective, and documented that the 4 essential questions when you choose a platform to comply with CMMC or DFARS are met. And this is a good indication of the kinds of questions and the kind of evidence that you ought to be looking for. Now let's go and look at how can you achieve the other 2 goals, which is that you achieve the compliance, data security, but in a manner that saves you cost and time. So here's the process that was used by the SMB that achieved compliance and many others. So first, you recognize that O365, G Suite, and Exchange, generally speaking, but certainly O365 Commercial and G Suite do not meet the requirements for CMMC and DFARS. So how do you step forward? First, you add PreVeil to your existing system. You keep working with them, but you put your CUI emails and you put your CUI data on PreVeil Drive. PreVeil is an encrypted email and a drive solution. This is a process that can occur in about an hour for most small businesses and in a couple of days for others. So when you do so, the first thing that you recognize is that you achieve compliance with about 84 out of the 110 NIST controls, some just by the use of PreVeil, others by the use of PreVeil in conjunction with policies and procedures. So where do you get those policies and procedures? Both Stuart and Regan said that compliance is about objective evidence, and the way to demonstrate compliance is to develop a system security plan. Every organization that will go for an audit must develop a system security plan. Typically, this is a 200 to 400 page document. And so when you recall the step one that I said, add PreVeil in a couple of hours, the step two that follows is that PreVeil, understanding the complexity that you face, provides you with documentation for the 84 controls that it addresses out of the 110. So you take those document sets that we provide and you add them to your system security plan. And now what happens is you have evidence that you are substantially in compliance with the 84 out of the 110 controls. A good side effect of it is that your baseline SPRS score that you got to report to the supplier portal is now over 40. So you went from negative 203, which assumes you had implemented nothing. You implemented PreVeil plus the document set, and now you're at 40 plus controls. And what's nice is that you are now demonstrating compliance with CMMC, certainly with your current DFARS NIST 800-171 obligations, but also the way the system is structured is with end-to-end encryption. And so you also meet ITAR requirements. The documentation that we provide is over 200 pages. So now instead of everybody doing those documents themselves, trying to understand the requirements, trying to figure out how to comply with them, we say use the technology platform, takes a few hours, populate your SSP with the PreVeil documents. And so now in a matter of a few hours to a days, you've laid a very strong foundation with 84 controls, a baseline SSP, 40 plus SPRS score. So now what's the remaining part? There is still no alternative to doing away with getting good, strong consulting advice. I wish Stuart and Regan could be cloned. I don't think that technology exists, but you got to take yourself from the 84 controls to the remaining 26, which is your 110. You got to take your baseline SPRS score, which with just PreVeil and nothing else will be in the 40 to 80 range. You got to take it to 110. So how do you do that? You pick a consulting organization or a consultant and you look for their credentials. Do they have a track record? Do they have CMMC AB certification? Have they done this thing before? Because doing it for 99% of the organization without an expert who has consulting expertise is a futile exercise. And you could see that from the complexity that Regan outlined. So in the step 3, you work with a consultant. Now the consultant already knows, if they are skilled, that look, you've got a baseline SSP, you've got strong documentation for the 84 odd controls, that you've implemented a very powerful system for storing and sharing CUI with PreVeil. So they are not redoing all of that. But what they now focus on is the remaining 26 controls. And for those remaining 26 controls, we will provide you with guidance on what those 26 are. Roughly speaking, 13 of those controls deal with the protection and securing of your endpoints through, antiviruses, proper configurations, your routers need to be properly configured, etc. And the remaining 13 are policies, procedures, and training. And again, those consultants having deep expertise can be in an expeditious way able to provide you with, look, here's what your incident response policy ought to be. You don't have to do it from scratch. I've done this thing before. And so now you've got yourself a very strong baseline to be audited, either by a C3PAO, or if the DIBCAC calls you, you've got a consultant by your side so that if DIBCAC calls you up for an audit, the consultant can also represent you as part of the audit. And presumably you should be in very good shape to achieve 110. But I will caution that very few organizations, when they go for an audit, will likely achieve 110 from the get-go. What you will find is that despite your best efforts, you will probably be lacking in a few areas, but what's nice is a few areas. And so what now CMMC allows for is a program of actions and milestones. They will be roughly 180 days long. So your audit occurs. Maybe you are lacking in 6, 8 controls, 10 controls, whatever was missed. You look at the audit findings, the consultant is with you, and you go to work in the next 3 to 6 months to address those audit findings. And you've got yourself for the next 3 years, CMMC baseline compliance. You're obviously good with your current DFARS 871 requirements. And if your organization is handling ITAR, again, if you had followed the PreVeil 3-step program, you now also have, because PreVeil email and drive are all end-to-end encrypted under ITAR regulations, which say if you're using a cloud system that is end-to-end encrypted, uses FIPS 140-2, and the provider of the cloud system has no decryption codes, which is the case with PreVeil, then you can use the system for ITAR, and so you also meet ITAR guidance. So this is an overall 3-step process that achieves the objectives in a manner that is relying on security first and the gold standard of end-to-end encryption first. But I hope what you got out of this webinar was you walk away with a clear understanding of the 4 questions you must ask of the compliance platform that you're choosing. And you also have a reasonable understanding of the rough 3 steps that you must follow to prepare your organization to demonstrate CMMC, NIST 800-171, and also ITAR compliance.
Great. And I think with that, Orly, if you can put up the questions slide, because I know that it has the contact information for Regan, Sanjeev, and myself in the event that anybody wants to try to reach either of us directly. But we've received a number of really good questions that have come in from the audience, and let's try to take a couple of them. I know that we've typed some answers into the chat on a few of them, but they're probably worth repeating. A couple of questions relate to FedRAMP moderate equivalency. One asks that I've not seen PreVeil listed on the marketplace. And so I think to be clear, to be listed in the marketplace, an organization has had to have gone through the process of getting an authority to operate, which involves having one or more agency sponsors and a detailed process to be able to go through. The requirement is not to have an ATO or to have an agency sponsor, a government agency sponsor, but rather to be able to demonstrate objectively that you've satisfied all of those requirements for FedRAMP moderate or that are in the FedRAMP moderate baseline. Number of ways that organizations have looked at doing this historically. Some have self-attested to this, and we all know that one of the reasons that CMMC was developed because of concern about the reliability of self-attestation. The direction that government is moving into, DoD is moving into, is saying in order for an organization to be able to demonstrate that it has satisfied those requirements of FedRAMP at the moderate baseline, that it is equivalent, is to be able to work with a 3PAO or a FedRAMP third-party assessment organization to go through an assessment to have that 3PAO complete a SAR or a security assessment report and to offer an opinion that states that in completing the assessment, they have confirmed following FedRAMP procedures that those requirements have been satisfied. And that's about the best and only objective evidence that an organization can provide if it's a cloud service. And so if you're looking to use a cloud service of any type, that's the objective evidence that you want to work or look for, rather than simply saying, well, are you FedRAMP moderate equivalent? Yes, it's kind of trust but verify to ensure that that they've achieved that. You won't see them on the marketplace. You'll see organizations that are going through or starting the process in in what's called in process. You'll see organizations that have gotten to the first hurdle in ready status to be assessed, and those that have gone through the process of being listed with an authority to operate. But you won't see the organizations that have achieved FedRAMP moderate equivalency, but you do need to ask for the objective evidence. So another question that that has come in that I had mentioned that 7012 was the law of the land, and somebody said, well, what about 1920 and 21? And so Regan, you're probably the best one who can help clarify the relationship between all of those.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really important if you're doing something else that you stop and you pay attention to this tidbit of information. DFAR 7012, the deadline was December 31st of 2017. The government, U.S. government and DOD, of course, expect it, and it is DOD policy that after January 1st of 2018, that there's an expectation that you have met all the requirements unless those requirements have been identified within the first 30 days of the contract award. So it's vitally important, if you look at the DOJ standing up, the Department of Justice's civil fraud division for the Federal False Claims Act, it is vitally important that you focus like a laser on meeting DFAR 7012 requirements and having the appropriate evidence that demonstrates that you have met and you are sustaining those requirements. Okay, that's the most important. That's the most important thing. There's nothing else that outshines that goal. Now, beginning with the end in mind, of course, CMMC certification will come online. Volunteer certification happening sometime this year, and moving forward progressively in the 3 years to follow before the full implementation. But the reality is that probably 90%, I'd still say, of the DIB is not fully compliant with DFAR 7012. And I think it would be easy to guess that 80% is not anywhere close. So it's very important that you stay laser focused on DFAR 7012 compliance requirements. And remember that it's not just about NIST 800-171, folks. That is the foundation for the CUI basic security requirements. The reality is that DFAR 7012 is a specified requirement, which means that you must do DFAR 7012 because that's the CUI basic, but you also have additional requirements unique to that clause that you must also meet, and they are not in NIST 800-171, folks. So that's also vitally important that you know that piece of information. The third leg on that stool is that if you are receiving or developing or sharing other types of CUI besides controlled technical information, whether it's marked or unmarked, you're responsible for both. There may be unique and specified requirements that you must also meet in order to meet DFAR 7012 clause requirements. So those three legs on the stool are vitally important for you to stay laser focused on, and for you, again, to seek reliable resources to support you to make a good assessment of where you're at, and then the path forward to meeting these requirements.
Very good. So question for Sanjeev. Let me just, I was been looking through, there's a lot of good questions in here. But a question, but how can you collaborate with PreVeil? I can understand the use of PreVeil for storage of CUI, for email, CUI in encrypted form, but how does PreVeil facilitate CUI in use? Sanjeev?
Yeah, it's a simple thing that, PreVeil Drive is very much functionally similar to, OneDrive or Google Drive. And so it actually has built into it not only storage, syncing, and sharing, but it has built into it collaboration capabilities. So for example, and I think the easiest way instead of me doing it is to just share my screen for a second. Here's an example of PreVeil Drive. So you got a folder over here, and if you want to collaborate on this folder, you simply right click on it and say share.
And we're not seeing anything.
Yeah, you're not sharing, Sanjeev.
Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. So I'm just going to, oh, it's not coming out of this. I'll just show it to you here. So PreVeil it facilitates, it's got built-in collaboration with it. So here's your PreVeil drive, here are your folders. Anything you drag and drop into it is automatically encrypted in compliance with the standards. And when you want to collaborate, you simply right-click here and say, share. And let's say you got a folder over here, and it's going to just come up over here in a second. So when you are collaborating and you say share, you add the email address. And when you add the email address of somebody, you can set whatever privileges you want. If you want to collaborate, you say, I want to edit and share, so that the person that you're sharing the folders with can edit those files. You can do so. New versions will be created. You'll see the changes. Or if you don't want them to collaborate and just look at the files, you can say read only. Or in the extreme case, you can say something like view only, which basically restricts the ability for them to even download the information. And you can set expiration dates so that you can say, look, I'm collaborating with you for only this period of time. And after that, the files and the information are wiped out, so that you no longer have responsibility for them and are trying to chase the other entity. So long-winded answer, but the short version of it is PreVeil supports full collaboration capabilities. It's not just a storage and sharing system. So I hope that answers that.
Very good. Marty, and so another question, I think this is an important one. It goes back to the point Regan made about trust. Says, are you saying that a company in the CMMC marketplace labeled as an RPO may or may not be capable of guidance to NIST 800-171 or CMMC level 2 certification? I think the simple answer is yes, that the requirement to be certified, or I'm sorry, the requirement to be registered is simply that, to be able to submit an application and register yourself. There's a very low bar for being able to demonstrate full knowledge and capability with respect to either of those frameworks. Somebody who's gone through and has become a CCP, who's gone through a certification, has demonstrated a basic understanding and proficiency of the framework. Somebody who's gone to the level of becoming an assessor or a provisional assessor. But there are a lot of good organizations, a lot of good people that are listed on the marketplace as RPs and RPOs, but not all of them. There's no requirement for somebody to demonstrate proficiency. So again, you need to be careful about the organizations, the individuals you choose to work with, to ensure that they really do have the experience, the knowledge, the understanding to truly guide you through this journey. So Sanjeev, somebody asked a question just to kind of double clicked and said, so you're not authorized. And I assume that they're speaking with respect to FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And I think the simple answer in some respects is, unless you're doing business with the government, you really can't be authorized because that is a requirement. But something more you'd like to add to that with respect to authorization?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that we have to be clear about is the requirement for you to use cloud services for CMMC or FIPS 180-172 is very clear. It is, you have to be FedRAMP baseline moderate and underscore equivalent. You can demonstrate equivalency in one of two ways. If you are obviously having an ATO, you're FedRAMP baseline moderate. But if you don't have an ATO, then how do you demonstrate equivalence? And the highest standard for doing so is you implement all the FedRAMP baseline moderate controls, you get an organization that's a FedRAMP 3PAO, such as Stuart's organization, to audit you. And when they audit you, then they can provide an assessment that you meet the standards or not. And this was an interesting and contentious point early part of last year. So in order to be very clear about this, we set the bar highest by getting a third-party audit. And then we went to the United States Department of Defense's Chief Information Officer and Chief Information Security Officer, and specifically got their approval that, look, is this an acceptable form of demonstrating FedRAMP baseline moderate equivalency? They studied the issue and then concurred and then provided formal approval that, yes, this is sufficient. And that's why we say that, the bar is very high, and that's the objective evidence that we will provide to you. I hope that helps.
Very good. And so maybe one last question to for maybe the three of us to to opine on, but it's a very timely one, and it's understood how important CMMC is to the DoD. But I'm assuming there's a larger emphasis today with events that are going on in the rest of the world, and considerations or thoughts that that either of you may have. I'll just kind of make one thought initially. Risk is very multidimensional. It's not just cyber risk that certainly affects security of information that relates to those tools and weapons we put in the hands of warfighters. Geopolitical risk is certainly very much an issue, and I'm sure there's a lot of information that that has been shared with good companies in Ukraine, working collaboratively with other organizations that were believed to be trustworthy, whose status may now be changing. Regan, Sanjeev, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we've got a lot. We are in a massively uncertain time. I mean, the expectations that we have are going on their end. And there is no time, folks, to continue to have your data at risk. For the national security interest is paramount. CISA represented that in their recent alert, and you can go to my LinkedIn profile and I put that in a post there. You have the risk to your IP. You have risk certainly to your family, risk to the warfighter, our warfighting capabilities that we share with our allies. This is serious business, folks. And so in order to protect the nation and your family, and certainly your company, that there's an absolute necessity to implement these requirements. Now, it's not Fort Knox. It's not the end all be all. It's simply the importance of meeting these requirements as a baseline security measure so that we can protect ourselves in a uniform and standardized way.
I think I would simply say that it has been my position from the get-go, from the founding of our company, that in essence, the defense industrial base is unquestionably, it doesn't require a rocket scientist, it's just common sense that you are at the forefront of a nation state cyber attack target. There is no question about it. So then it becomes a question of what's your responsibility, as Regan said, to yourself. It is to protect the data with the best known security systems that are available. And compliance ought to be an offshoot of that, an output of that. And a lot of times we see a lot of confusion in people. Well, this is a compliance initiative, it's causing me heartburn, and it is complex, and it is causing you heartburn. But the underlying issue over here is the need for protecting the CUI doesn't go away. So it's really your call. At the end of the day, a simple answer is do the right thing, protect your CUI with the best known systems that can provide you compliance as an offshoot. And when you do so, you're in good stead because number one, you're protected from cyber attack, protected from ransomware. Secondly, you are in compliance with your DFAR 7012 commitments that you have signed. You have said, I am going to be compliant with NIST 800-171 with all 110 requirements. By doing so, you meet them. And third, the CMMC bugaboo is no longer such a daunting thing before you, because once you've done what's necessary to protect your information and comply with DFARs, sort of CMMC comes for the ride, because you say, hey, I'm compliant with the 110 requirements, and then the auditors come and take a look at it. And so it's just sort of a natural outcome of it. So it's to me, it seems like a straightforward thing to do, but I think it gets unnecessarily complicated. What I think the Ukrainian crisis has done is for those that were skeptical that you're not at the forefront of cyber attack, I think this sort of amply demonstrates that in the event of even a minor skirmish, the first attack that's going to be unleashed will be in the defense industrial base.
Very true. And I know that we've reached time. I certainly want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thanking you on behalf of myself and Regan and Sanjeev. This is recorded, and information regarding the recording will be distributed to everybody who's registered for this webinar. And again, we had shared our contact information on an earlier slide. Please feel free to reach out to any one of the three of us if you have any questions, if we can be of any support. So again, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.